you're getting a stud. And he's still young too. We've seen it before. He has the ability to finish as the #1 overall quarterback in all of fantasy football. The year that he did that was 2015, and in that season he averaged an entire 2.7 points per game more than Russell Wilson did last year. And we know how much Russell Wilson dominated. So if you're looking for upside, you know Cam Newton's got it. And a common misconception is that Newton just isn't a safe pick, and he may not feel like that because people confuse his lack of passing yardage week over week, and they confuse that for volatility. In fact though, his rushing ability is what actually gives him a much safer floor week over week, at least safer than some of these other quarterbacks, especially in this range. This is something that we are always looking for in quarterbacks. You'll notice that 3 out of the 5 quarterbacks on this list have the ability to make plays with their legs, and it's because they give themselves a better floor week over week, and a very strong percentage of their fantasy points actually comes from production made on the ground. As for Newton, he has averaged 618 yards and 8 rushing touchdowns per season, which is not only stellar, it's actually miles ahead of the next closest rushing quarterback, and even totals out to about 6.9 fantasy points per game, and that's before Newton has even thrown a pass. So when we're talking about floor, he has one. It's no secret though, as a passer, he is not very accurate. He's not the type of guy to really elevate the players around him, at least not in the passing game. As we know, mobile quarterbacks, they do have the ability to elevate the rushers around them, but as for being a prototypical passer, he's never really going to be that guy, but he doesn't need to be, definitely not to be a fantasy asset for your fantasy team. At this point in his career though, he is much more consistent than he was in previous seasons, and what you can expect from him this season is probably about 3,300 yards and around 20 plus touchdowns, which are both more than Joe Flacco accomplished last season. So Newton may seem expensive for what his draft day price tag is, but if you really break it down, he's a virtual lock to finish ahead, or at least at the position where he's being drafted, which is really tough to say for some of these other players. They all have a lot of risk. Newton has had a really large sample size, and remember, he has arguably the best cast of weapons that he has ever had in the receiving game at any point in his career. You have Christian McCaffrey, who could likely lead all running backs in targets, receptions, and receiving yards. We saw something we really liked in this past preseason game, something we hadn't seen all last season, which was Christian McCaffrey's ability to break away a big play. This is something he was supposed to bring into the NFL. We did not see it one bit last season, but hopefully we see more of it. If Newton can just have a dump off pass go to the house a couple times this season, that's going to greatly change the outlook for his whole fantasy value, and we just saw McCaffrey do it. Let's hope he can build on it, but there's more weapons than just McCaffrey. You have rookie receiver DJ Moore stepping up, looking phenomenal. I had my doubts on him in the beginning, but at this point, just watching everything I can on him and seeing how he has been progressing throughout training camp and in the preseason, looks like he's going to be a solid producer. Kelvin Benjamin, he's gone. His team actually played better and scored more points when Benjamin was not in the starting lineup. I know it sounds weird. Benjamin had a good start. At least he had a 1,000-yard season as a rookie, but he was really holding this team behind. Like we said, Benjamin's not a good receiver. He never was. It's unlikely that he ever will be anything more than what he was in his rookie season. And without him in the lineup for the first year, this offense should be able to have a little bit of a different identity than it has in previous seasons. What you're left with is a combination of Devin Funchess and Greg Olsen. We personally believe Funchess, especially in the red zone, is going to be used a ton. He could legitimately score 10 touchdowns this season. And as for Greg Olsen, he is back to 100%. And it's no secret, Greg Olsen is going to be Cam Newton's safety net. He has been throughout his career. And what you're left with is plenty of options for Cam Newton to get going in the passing game and to make more plays with his legs. Don't forget, Newton was the second highest fantasy scoring quarterback just last season, and that was without Olsen and without DJ Moore. So they just added more capable weapons, and yet he's going 4 spots lower. I get that you're inserting Aaron Rodgers back in, Deshaun Watson back in, but to automatically place him down from 2 to 6 when he has more weapons than he did a season ago, it just makes no sense. So if you're interested in taking quarterbacks early, he is definitely the first one that we would target. Before I do go on to the next player, we didn't do a stat of the day today, but I do want to gauge some of your thoughts on the draft coming up, and which player do you think, out of all players, all positions, quarterbacks, tight ends, receivers, who do you think is the absolute best value in the entire fantasy draft? Who do you think is being criminally undervalued and why? Leave it in the comment section down below. There's no right or wrong answer. We're just trying to gauge you guys' opinions and have some fun as we prepare for our drafts. And the next player on this this list is going to be Andrew Luck, who's coming in at quarterback 8, being drafted in the 8th round with the 2nd pick in that round. If you haven't drafted yet, you probably aren't going to be able to snag him at the discount that you're currently getting him at, because as we know, he is continuing to rise, and if you ask us, he should be ranked among the top tier quarterbacks. Those players like Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. And the major concerns, the reason that he isn't is always coming back to his injury, but he's playing. There's nothing more you need to see. I will say to all the doubters out there, he did play, he had a limited showing, but he didn't look great. He didn't look terrible either, but mostly what I'm looking for is if he's healthy, and he looked healthy. It's great to finally get him back, and all of you that are drafting should understand how much of an asset he can truly be to your fantasy team while he's healthy. He's a virtual lock to finish top 10 at the position. He's actually been a top 10 quarterback in every healthy season he's played, and excluding his rookie season, he has been a top 5 quarterback in every season that he's played. So he has proven to be elite with an extremely high floor, and the very last time that we saw him on the field, he was the quarterback 4 in all of fantasy football in points per game. If we're talking other concerns though, I know a major concern for some people would be the tough schedule. They have a tough division. Whenever you have to face the Texans with JJ Watt and Jadeveon Clowney, or the Jaguars with Jalen Ramsey, Calais Campbell, or even the Titans, who have made vast improvements in their secondary, it's going to make you a little bit worried, but it shouldn't scare you away too much. The good thing about these opponents within their division is that they can put up some serious points, which means this has some real shootout potential. Deshaun Watson, he can sling it. Jacksonville, they were top 5 in points scored last season. And then you have Titans, which could be one of the most improved offenses from last season heading into this year. And it's a big reason why we think that Andrew Luck is going to be the garbage time king of the 2018 season. Who his weapons are is not really a big deal. He's never really had strong weapons to begin with, and if you're actually grading out the weapons that he is heading into the season with, you can see that he has a very underrated cast of receivers. Between T.Y., Ryan Grant, and Chester Rogers, you have Eric Ebron and Jack Doyle. Everyone knows we can expect big things from T.Y. this season, but we love Grant as well as a late flyer pick. He actually made our top 5 late round flyer picks at the wide receiver position. If you haven't watched that one yet, check that out. And as for Doyle, he is one of our main late round targets at the tight end position as well. So we aren't just believing in Luck, we're also believing in the talent around him, and the running backs themselves really lend themselves well to coming and playing from behind. You have a slew of pass catching running backs, from Marlon Mack, who is currently dealing with a minor injury, and Nyheim Hines. While Luck hasn't been known to heavily target the running back position throughout his career, the skill sets of these rushers coming out of the backfield are going to give him a lot more flexibility than he's had in previous seasons. There's going to be plenty of receiving work to go around, and if you ask us, a safe projection for Luck would be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4,500 passing yards and 30 to 35 touchdowns. He's no slouch on the ground either. He's probably going to get around 200 to 300 rushing yards and maybe 2 to 3 touchdowns as well in that area too. So do you really see these as quarterback 8 numbers? Not a chance. These are top 5 numbers. The only way he doesn't exceed his draft day price tag is if he takes a big hit and he could potentially re-injure his shoulder. But for that risk alone, you don't want to just throw away all of this upside, and you should be taking him every chance you get. Keep in mind, he's probably going to get off to a slow start. Remember, he hasn't played football in 2 years. He's going to be rusty, and the only way he can get over that rust factor is by getting valuable reps in. He may not get those valuable reps until the season starts, so don't just watch him play in one game and give up to him. He may not gain his complete confidence back until after he faces the Bengals in week 1 and the Redskins in week 2. But when comparing him to the quarterbacks being drafted around him, it's just not even close if you ask us. So you have Carson Wentz ranked 1 spot ahead of him, and Kirk Cousins ranked 1 spot behind him. Don't get me wrong, I love Wentz. I'm an Eagles fan myself, but there has to be concerns over this offense and the ability to remain performing at really such a high level. The NFL is a copycat league. Everybody wanted to see what the Eagles did to be so successful. It's not hard to picture the run pass option making its way around the league, seeing the percentage of plays that use the RPO increase by about 10% across the board. That is not an unlikely scenario whatsoever. Also, the entire league is reviewing the film on the Eagles, and when you have Nick Foles come in after an injury and perform at such a high level, it definitely makes you question whether Wentz's top 5 finish was based on his actual ability, or if those numbers were simply inflated just because of the great system that he was in. We all know that Nick Foles wasn't a top 5 quarterback, but he sure did play like one in the playoffs. And if you're saying that doesn't concern you, then you're not really looking at the situation the right way. I'm not saying Wentz is bad, and I'm not saying he doesn't have the ability to be elite. I just don't think we've seen a large enough sample size to be able to say that he is actually a true stud and you can take it to the bank and he's going to perform like one year in and year out. So that's Wentz. Then you have Cousins being taken one spot behind him. And don't get us wrong, we do love Cousins, and he almost made this list, but he fell short in this category because he's not truly a great value. He's a good pick, he's a safe pick, and is it possible for Cousins to become a top 5 quarterback with his newly acquired talent? Yeah, it's possible, but it's much more likely that he's going to be just a relatively consistent guy finishing middle of the pack as a back-end quarterback one, somewhere in the neighborhood of that 6 to 10 range, which is actually exactly where he's going. So like I said, it doesn't make him a terrible pick, but it doesn't necessarily make him a steal. The offense, it's good, but so is the defense, and this could have really run heavy game scripts late in the game, so Cousins won't need to throw for 4,800 passing yards like he did on that poor Washington Redskins team with a terrible defense year over year. And joining a new team that just lost its offensive coordinator is always a recipe for some adversity. So for those reasons, it's tough to predict that Cousins is going to just absolutely explode this year. So when you're really taking into consideration all of the quarterbacks going around him, I think Luck is an amazing pick at this stage of the draft. The next quarterback on this list, we're getting deeper. It's Patrick Mahomes coming in at quarterback 16. He is also coming in at the 7th pick of the 11th round. And if you guys haven't heard anything about Mahomes yet, you must be completely ignoring all social media, because it is impossible to avoid all of the hype, to avoid all of the highlights. Patrick Mahomes is basically everywhere. The odd part though is that his ADP is still not climbing. He joins a team where he's replacing a game manager style of quarterback like Alex Smith. And even though he was a game manager, he was coming off of a career year, and I'm not talking in a few categories, I'm talking across the board. He had career highs in yardage, touchdowns, yards per attempt, quarterback rating, you name it. And don't think that he did that all on his own. He didn't just all of a sudden 13 years into his career step into the next level and start to perform as a Pro Bowl level player. No, it was a product of good coaching, and it was a product of the weapons. So what can we expect this year from Patrick Mahomes? Well, they not only have the same weapons that they had last season, they also added Sammy Watkins, a first-round talent. So now in total, you have Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Sammy Watkins, and Kareem Hunt. So this has to be one of the most explosive positional groups in the entire league. Any one of these players can make a giant play and gain chunks and chunks in yards at a time. And what's Mahomes' specialty? His big arm. We saw him connect with a 68-yard pass to Tyreek Hill, which was one of the longest passes I've ever seen when it comes to how far the ball actually traveled through the air. And if this is what he did in a random preseason game, imagine the capability that he has if he really just lets it loose during the season or he's playing from behind. And it's no secret, Mahomes has delivered to be exactly as advertised, and it would be silly not to get excited about him this year. What's even better about him this season is that he's coming into a team that just has a completely demolished defense from what it was in previous seasons. What this is going to do is to provide solid game scripts for Mahomes, and it may come at the expense of Kareem Hunt, but it's also going to help Patrick Mahomes' production and the wide receivers on this team. One knock on him though is the tough schedule, and I'm not talking based on last year's records, but based on the Vegas implied win totals and also the cornerbacks that he's going to have to face. The receivers on this team are very good at getting separation, but it definitely has to be a cause for concern if we're saying everything, and at the very least you just have to temper your expectations a little bit. But regardless, he's going off the board at quarterback 16. It's still a steal. I have no problem starting him as my quarterback 1, and in leagues that give you bonuses for long touchdowns or long touchdown passes, he needs to get a significant bump up. The next quarterback on this list is Marcus Mariota of the Tennessee Titans, coming in at quarterback 17, the 3rd pick in the 12th round, and we are absolutely loving the upside that's coming from this Titans offense as a whole. They finally are moving away from that archaic run-heavy system from years past, and that's going to benefit Mariota more than anybody else. We mentioned it earlier, but the rushing quarterbacks, they just have a higher floor, and Marcus Mariota has averaged over 300 rushing yards per season since entering the league. Last season, he even ran in 5 touchdowns. If we saw that type of production on the ground this season, we would be ecstatic. And I get it. There's a lot of concerns that come with Mariota. He didn't look good at all last year, and I think that's an understatement. A lot of people don't believe in him as an actual passing quarterback, and while he hasn't been given a ton of weapons, we do have to be completely transparent and admit that he hasn't been consistent throughout his career. But if you ask me, I see him similar to a player like Cousins. When I dive into the numbers, and I'm not talking the face value numbers, when I dive into the nitty-gritty details, their production looks extremely similar. And I'm not talking about the way that they get production. Obviously, Kirk Cousins, he's a high yardage guy. He's a really, really accurate passer. What I'm talking about is that when we're looking at individual points and data points of each player and where they struggle in year over year, where they excel at year over year, areas like production in certain quarters, playing from ahead, playing from behind, red zone efficiency, those types of stats. Both Mariota and Cousins have played exceedingly well in almost all categories throughout an individual season, but the only issue is that they just do not play well consistently in certain areas. They kind of flip-flop. They'll be really good at one thing one year and then really bad at it the next year. With most other quarterbacks, we see them being really strong in the same areas year over year and also really weak in the same areas year over year. Being good in all areas, but not being able to do it consistently season over season, it's a blessing and it's a curse, because we like to see quarterbacks improve in certain areas, but when those areas are constantly fluctuating, it's tough to gauge their true identity. Is it true that Mariota could have a season where he just is a complete beast in all categories? Yes, because I know that on every aspect of the football field, he can perform in every major category. But could he also have a season where the wheels completely fall off and he is an absolute nobody and he just completely bombs? Yes, and I think we saw a bit of that last season. While most people don't believe in his actual passing ability, we think he gets an unfair knock. We actually believe he's an underrated quarterback, and it would surprise you to hear, but he was the most accurate quarterback on play action passes last season and was the most efficient red zone passer in 2016. So he has the intangibles, and this offense will lend itself much better to the strength of their weapons heading into this season. You have Corey Davis, who has legitimate wide receiver 1 upside. You have Tyrod Taylor, who just posted a game with 4 receptions for 95 yards and 2 touchdowns. There's also Dion Lewis and Derrick Henry, who are no slouches in the pass game, and they have the most reliable weapons on offense, none other than the criminally underrated Delaney Walker. So this team is not short of weapons. They have guys that they can use, and I think we all can admit that if these players all play to their strengths, they won't need to have a monster season for Mariota to be a top 12 quarterback this season. And if this Titans offense can overcome the tough schedule early on, it's very likely that a few of these players that I just listed are going to be on a lot of championship rosters. The last player on this list is Tyrod Taylor, coming in at quarterback 22. He's being picked in the 5th pick of the 14th round, and we wanted to give you guys a late round quarterback that we know you could land. Let's be real, the players that we just listed before Tyrod, they're really good, and many fantasy owners are going to have them as targets. Each one of them has their own fan base of people that really believe in them this year. As for Tyrod Taylor, I think he's going to be going undrafted in basically every league. Your home leagues, your work leagues, nobody wants him. He's coming off the board at quarterback 22. That means 10 out of 12 teams would need to draft a backup quarterback in order for him to be suggested. And long story short, if you want him, you can draft him. And the reasons we like him is basically because the weapons that are around him. This team has plenty of firepower on the offensive side of the football. You have Josh Gordon, Jarvis Landry, Duke Johnson, Nick Chubb, David Njoku. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. There is absolutely no reason why this team should not be moving the ball extremely well, and Tyrod should be the type of quarterback who can execute this offense pretty nicely. So far in this preseason, he has gone 9 of 13 in the passing game, even throwing for a touchdown. And we're not trying to just hype up this offense in particular. No, this is more specifically for the quarterback position. Tyrod himself, he's been a quarterback one before and recently, and that was on Buffalo, a team that we know had much less weapons and a much better defense, which doesn't necessarily lend itself well to fantasy quarterbacks. Now, this pick, it's not just for Tyrod as well. We really do believe in Baker Mayfield. Like we said, if you believe in the weapons, you have to believe in the quarterback. That's why I tend to like Eli Manning a little bit more than consensus. You can't have a bunch of successful weapons and an unsuccessful quarterback. It just doesn't add up. You can't have one without the other. But diving back to Mayfield, if you watch that game, he looked incredible. He definitely looked the part of an NFL quarterback, and even if I drafted him first overall, I would not be disappointed disappointed by anything that I saw in that first preseason game. What really surprised me the most though was his arm strength. He was completely slinging it. He attempted to throw some throws that a rookie is usually a little hesitant to attempt, especially in their very first game. So I think that showed a lot of confidence, and if Tyrod does end up taking the bench and Mayfield does end up becoming the starter, I think there is huge potential for this offense as well. So I don't think that you're drafting Tyrod and risking losing out on a mid-season. No, I think you can literally plug and play Mayfield. They may have different skill sets and may put together their fantasy performances a little bit different and may target different players over others, but overall I think there are too many weapons for them to fail, and I think both quarterbacks are legitimately good quarterbacks. Both quarterbacks can get it done on the ground. I'm talking use their legs. They're gonna get some rushing touchdowns, they're gonna get some rushing yardage, which means they're going to have a higher floor. And if the type of weapons that the Browns have were on any other team, I'm talking change the jersey, make them the Cowboys, make them the Rams, make them the Cardinals, make them any other team, we would be drafting Tyrod all day. But the problem is they have a Browns uniform on, and we aren't able to take our heads away from how much the Browns suck. And as much as we want to believe that this team is going to be really good, nobody wants to put their money where their mouth is. Is anybody betting on the Browns this season? Probably not. But the more we break it down, the more we see in preseason, the more we're starting to like them. And when we're talking about quarterback 22, which is virtually playing at their floor, which means you are definitely getting a value on all Cleveland Brown quarterbacks this season. Alright everybody, that's going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.